Iwaratan Bash. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tavon Cooke, and I'm the Deputy Public Affairs Officer here at the U.S. Consulate General in Erbil. Thank you for tuning in with us this evening for the second segment of our Education USA Study in the United States program. What is Education USA? Education USA is a network of advising centers funded by the Department of State, and what we do is we give accurate and complete information on how to study in the United States. We're going to talk about the application process tonight, things international students should keep in mind as they put together their application package. In our first segment, we talked about tips and strategies that students could use to research universities and colleges in the United States. To find that, simply go to our consulate's Facebook page and go to the videos tab. In future segments, we'll talk about financial aid, student visas, and things students should keep in mind before traveling to the United States. Here at the consulate, we have an education advising center, as well as a dedicated educational advisor. And what he and I do, we go out to colleges and high schools in the region, and we talk about tips and strategies that students should keep in mind as they're considering studying in the United States. If you are a college student or a high school student in the region and you're interested in the consulate coming to talk to you, send us a message in the comments. We'll check it out, and then we'll work with your school to arrange a visit. So tonight I said we'll talk about the application process. And there are several steps in the application process that international students need to keep in mind to make themselves very competitive for studying in the United States. Several things that you need to pay attention to and be very, very detailed and thorough with to be a competitive applicant. So the very first step is taking a look at the application form. Many colleges and universities have their own application forms, different sections that need to be completed accurately and thoroughly. It's the first document that most admissions people look at, and it's important to make a good impression by completing this document accurately and properly. The application is done primarily online, along with an application fee that you will pay to the college or university via credit card. If you're a high school student thinking about studying at the undergraduate level in the United States, there is something called the Common Application, which is one application that is accepted by over 500 universities. So if you're considering multiple universities for the college level studies, undergraduate level studies, you would only have to complete one, select multiple universities, and then that application form is then sent to each of those universities. For the graduate school level, master's, PhD, it's a little bit different. You don't have the common application, so it will be very important to look at the application forms on each of those universities' websites and complete the relevant parts of that pertain to you. The next part, and arguably one of the most important parts of the application process, is the statement of purpose, sometimes known as the personal statement. And it's your opportunity to let the admissions committee know who you are. Tell them who you are as a person, tell them the unique qualities that you possess, and as well as tell them why you're a good fit for the university and why you chose it. So when you're writing the statement of purpose, you want to talk about who you are, some of the accomplishments that you've done, both academically, volunteer-wise, and talk about some things that make you you. If you're a person, for instance, who plays a musical instrument, you might want to talk about that. Or you won an award for local or regional sports, or a competition such as a poetry competition. You can highlight these accomplishments there, as well as talking about why you chose this particular school. For example, if you're looking at a university that has a very strong track record for producing people well-trained for nonprofit work or entrepreneurial work, then you can list that as a reason in your personal statement why you chose that school. Shows you've done your homework, and it lets the admissions committee know that you're a very serious candidate because you've researched the institution's fit between you and them. So make sure you take the time to write the personal statement, and when you're done, set it aside, look at it again to revise it, have a trusted friend or advisor look at it, make sure it's pretty polished so that, again, you make a good impression on the admissions committee at the college or university in the United States. The next step, letters of reference. It's also an important step in the admissions process. And it's very important that you find people who know you well and who you trust to give a very strong recommendation. If you are very close to a certain teacher, took many classes with them, did very well, or perhaps a guidance counselor who knows you well, coach for your sports team, supervisor for a work or a community service activity outside of school, have that person take the time to write a very strong letter of reference for you. I know sometimes people want the most well-known person to write a letter of reference thinking that it's going to help, say, the CEO of a company or someone with celebrity type status, as opposed to the person a little bit lower but who's worked with you closely. My advice would be you can create a balance, but at the end of the day, go for the person who knows you the best and who's able to write the strongest reference. I'll give you an example in my case. When I was applying to graduate school and for a graduate school fellowship, I had a really close advisor write a letter of reference. And after I got into the program coordinator stopped me and pulled me aside and said, Tavon, I remember reading this reference letter from the one person who wrote it for you. And at that moment, we knew that you were a pretty strong candidate. And it goes to show you that people who know you well are going to take and want to see you succeed, are going to take the time to write a quality letter so that you can gain admission and succeed. So keep that in mind for letter of references. For some undergraduate programs and many postgraduate programs in the United States, they will ask you to submit a resume. International students may not be familiar with the format of resumes in the United States. So it would be helpful either to do a search online for examples of resumes in the United States, or to search the university's career services section, where many of them have examples of how to format a resume. And then in your resume, list a summary of your educational achievements, awards, honors. List a summary of your work experience, as well as your volunteer experience. Sometimes students may not realize that volunteer work experience and community service is counted just as equally as paid work experience. So if you volunteered or have done community service but have done very little paid work experience, you'll still be a good candidate. Just be sure to list that volunteer experience, as well as the types of accomplishments you've gained and contributed to the company or organization in your resume. Next are the transcripts. Transcripts are records of your grades in any academic institution where you've studied. When you're applying to universities and colleges in the United States, it's very important to submit transcripts from all of the places where you've studied. We have a question from Howard. How can a high school student do an exchange program year in the United States? Howard, that's a very good question, and thank you for that. What I'll encourage you to do actually is to go to our consulate's Facebook page, check the video section where you'll see the first segment on how to research academic options in the United States. And there I talk about different strategies you can use to search for programs of study and exchange in the United States. Returning back to the topic of transcripts, like I mentioned, it is a record of where you've studied, and it's important to submit those for all of the places you've studied to the universities that you're applying to. In the event that your transcripts are not in English, and your university is not able to provide a translated copy, you'll be responsible for going to a reputable company, having them translate it, providing a certified translated copy to the university, and submitting it that way. In many cases, international students will need to have their transcripts evaluated by an outside service. There are a couple of services that you can use for that. First is to check the university's website to see which they prefer, but there are also other organizations that are well known that can evaluate your transcript. And then once that's done, many universities actually allow you the option of uploading a scanned copy of your transcript into their application system. And then once you're accepted into the university, you can send them the original copy. We do have a question from Akam. How can we get financial aid for graduate study in a specific university of the United States? So great question, Akam. In our next segment of the Education USA Facebook chat series, we'll talk specifically about financial aid at the undergraduate and graduate levels. So we have a question from Muhammad asking where and how can we apply? So that's a very good question. That was what I talked about at the beginning of the series, the beginning of this segment. So when you identify the university that you're interested in studying in, you would go to their website in the application section, and there's an online application. You would complete that application and submit it to the university. In the event you're looking at multiple undergraduate institutions, there's a common application. You can go to www.commonapp.org and fill in the application, select the multiple universities that you're interested in having your application sent to. So we have a question from Noor. When a graduate student from the 12th grade has a below average grade, does he still have the chance to apply to universities in the United States? That's a very, very good question, Noor. One of the things that I do want to mention is that many schools and universities in the United States take what is called a holistic approach to looking at students. And what a holistic approach means is that there isn't one particular aspect that's going to disqualify you from studying in the United States. So say you're a student that has not the best grades, but you have excellent test scores, you have very good, high quality work experience, then you still have a chance. You can go ahead and submit your application. Universities will weigh the different parts of your application. Likewise, if you don't have the best test scores, but you have very excellent grades and good work experience, it isn't a disqualifying factor. You can go ahead and submit your application. And speaking about test scores, that's one of the last things that students should keep in mind as they prepare their application package. So for high school students interested in studying at the university level, they have the SAT, which is the Scholastic Aptitude Test, and the ACT, which is which stands for American College Testing. So you would take one of those two standardized tests and have them sent to the universities that you're interested in studying at. For graduate school, there's the GRE and the GMAT, which is geared primarily towards business students. Again, if you do well on those along with having excellent grades and good work experience, great. But if you don't do so well on those, but you have good grades and work experience, then that's also fine. Keeping in mind that you're an international student, sometimes your English may not be the strongest, and so there may be parts of it that you miss. And admissions committees do understand that. And the final piece for standardized testing are the English language tests, so the TOEFL and the IELTS. And as a non-native speaker and non-native English speaking international students will be required to take those tests and submit those as part of the application package to the United States universities. In the event that any of your test scores are not the best, or you are missing some core courses that pertain to your course of study, but the university still thinks you're a very strong candidate, they may grant you something called conditional admission. So say you're an international student who wants to study biology. You have excellent biology grades, very strong references, solid resume, but you didn't do so well on your standardized test or in your English test. You could gain conditional admission, take a summer course at the university to strengthen up your English, and then once you finish that program, continue on to the normal program of study. Likewise, if you're, for instance, going into engineering, but you're missing a few core engineering courses that were not offered at your university, conditional admissions means that you would take the summer to take those core courses at the university before continuing on to the regular program. So we have a few other questions. I'm interested in studying in California, Majar says. How much money would I spend per month? It's a very good question. I do talk about that in the first segment of the series, which is on our Facebook page in the video section. One of the things that students, both undergraduate and graduate students, one of the tips that they should keep in mind when they're researching universities is to see what's affordable to them. Many universities list in their schedule of fees how much tuition, room and board, and everything is, and they give you a cost of living estimate. And so you're able to see that for every particular university you're interested in. And like I said, in the next segment, which you can find out about by following our Facebook page, you'll learn about different tips and strategies for applying for financial aid as an international student. Keeping in mind, continuing with the application package, deadlines are very important. So be aware of all of the deadlines that a university has when you're applying. The deadline for the application, the deadline for the letters of reference, the deadline for your transcripts, and all of the other associated documents. Many applications for the universities open in the fall, somewhere around August, September, and the deadlines close somewhere around December and January. Some universities have what is called rolling deadline, rolling application, rolling admissions. It means you can submit your application package at any time of the year. So Muhammad has a question. Is it better to have a support letter or invitation letter from the university to fill in the application form? The question is slightly unclear. If Muhammad, what you mean, is it helpful to have a letter of support or a letter of reference from a teacher or faculty member as part of the application package, then absolutely yes. That's one of the key components of the application process, because it allows the university to see how strong of a candidate you are through other people's eyes, the people who've worked with you, who've supervised you, who've evaluated your previous work. So absolutely. Reboir asks, what are the main points to get acceptance from universities for master's study? Thank you, Reboir, for the question. In case you tuned into this Facebook Live chat a little bit late, it will be available in full on the Facebook page. And I do encourage you to watch it from the beginning and take note of each of the steps that I give for producing a strong application package for study, from the application itself, strong statement of purpose, polished resume, very strong letters of reference, solid transcripts, and good standardized test scores. So once you submit the application in December or January, or whenever you do in the case of rolling admissions, I know sometimes students get a little bit nervous waiting those few months before they get their admissions decisions, which usually come out February, March. I just encourage you to occupy your time continuing to get good grades in school, continuing to do good quality community service, and making yourself a better and stronger candidate so that when you continue to study in the United States, you can carry that track record of excellence into your new academic institution. One other important reason to continue being a strong student while you wait for your admissions decision is that universities in the United States do sometimes ask for a final transcript. And I have seen instances where students do very well, solid grades, solid performance up to the application, and then they let their grades drop because they think that the application is done and the admissions is guaranteed. But I've seen some universities withdraw admission from students who have let their performance drop. So make sure you keep being a strong student so that you can continue your studies in the States. So Abdullah has a question. Can you apply for more than one university at a time? Absolutely. And I actually encourage students to consider more than one university. Sometimes students have their dream university, which is the one that they're pouring everything into. But sometimes it's good to have a few more realistic universities that you would be satisfied getting into and attending in case your top university didn't accept you. The number of universities you apply to is a personal decision, and several factors drive that, from the cost of the admissions application fees to just basically being okay with any university that you get into. So in the undergraduate level, if you use the common application, you can select multiple universities and your application is sent to all of those universities. At the graduate level, you apply to each university individual and pay the fees for each of the universities. Renas asks, are the studies full-time or part-time? In your case, and in the case of many international students, it's going to be full-time. Full-time studies and being a full-time student is a requirement to have a student visa to study in the United States. And in one of our future segments, which you'll learn about after we announce it on our Facebook page, are some of the other tips for applying and keeping in good status with the student visa. So thank you for the question. You do have to be a full-time student in the United States. Shahid asks, is there any university that does not require English language? Perhaps outside the United States, but if you're interested in studying in the United States, you will have to have a sufficient level of English to be able to pursue university studies. Again, the cutoff score for TOEFL and IELTS will vary by the university, but your level of English should be strong enough to understand university lectures, participate in scholarly discussions, and write academic papers. Ahmad asks, do you have any possibilities for scholarship programs? So Ahmad, that's a good question. We will talk about financial aid in our next segment. So definitely join in for that. Muhammad asks, are successful application based only on grades? Not at all, not only on grades. Universities will take a holistic approach. So if you don't have the strongest grades, then if other parts of your applications are good, then you still have a strong chance. Sometimes, and I've seen this case a lot in the United States, sometimes university students get off to a bad start because they're learning how to adjust to college level studies. In the first 2 years, they have not the best grades, but in their final year or their final 2 years, their grades are really strong. Universities do notice that in the United States, and they, in many cases, look at that very favorably. So if you're a student who started off a little bit weaker, but continued a little bit to get better grades as you progress, then that's also a very good sign. Let's see. Bojin asks, what about the copy of the I-20? We'll talk about that in the future for student documents for the student visa. Let's see. Rasht asks, what about scholarships? Are there places where we can find scholarships for Iraqi students? Next time I'll give you some tips on where to search for scholarships for international students in general, which would be including Iraqi students. So thank you for the question. We do have another question. What are the agencies that I can use to evaluate my transcript? And I did mention that earlier. And in the comments section after the Facebook live chat, we'll actually write the name and the email address of the agencies so that you can look them up. We're not endorsing any particular service, so the first thing I would suggest you do is check the admission section of the university you're interested in. Usually they'll give you instructions as an international student how to have your transcripts evaluated, either directly with the university or a private service. Many times they list the service, sometimes they ask you to use one that you find. There are two. One is the Association of International Credential Advisors. So we'll write that down as well as the link at the end of the chat so that you have that. The second organization is the National Association of Credential Evaluation Services. And each of those two organizations have a list of companies and educational institutions that will evaluate your transcript to determine the level of equivalency for study in the United States. So thank you for that question. We have another question. Do universities accept emailed copies of the transcripts, since some universities in Iraq only issue one transcript to the student? So I mentioned earlier that you will have the opportunity to upload a scanned copy of your transcript into the university system. And then if you're accepted, the university in the United States will give you instructions on how to have your local university send them an original copy of your transcript. So Nora asks, where and how to get more information and recommendations to apply for U.S. universities? Excellent question. Our website, educationusa.state.gov, has more information. Tune in for check out the first segment of our video series in the Facebook page where you can also get that. But you can start educationusa.state.gov to get an idea of how to go about searching. Renas asks, how is student life? That's a good question. That will actually be our final segment in this series in a few weeks. So tune in for that, where we'll talk about student life in the United States. Majar asks, if I receive an offer, for instance, from the University of California, how long do I have to wait to get a visa? Good question. We'll talk about that soon. And just give you a brief answer. You know, your university will send you some documents, you apply for a visa, and then after the visa interview, you get your visa and then go to the United States. A little bit more nuanced than that, but the process is rather simple and much simpler than people think. So definitely stay tuned for our future segment on that. We have another question. Is the Fulbright open? Great question, Kajan. It's not exactly related to this topic, but if you do check our Facebook page, you can find more information about which programs, our exchange programs, are open, as well as the missions website, iq.usembassy.gov, where you'll find a complete list of our scholarships and fellowships. We do have another question. How long does it take to receive an answer from the school, whether accepted or rejected? Very good question. Typically, like I mentioned, application deadlines are December, January. Admissions decisions come out sometime in spring, so February, March. So a couple of months after you submit your application, you'll expect a response from the university that's positive or not so positive. Hussein asks, can Iraqi citizens obtain a study visa for a 2-year diploma? So if you're talking about community colleges, which I did mention in our first segment, yes, you would treat a community college the same way as you would treat a 4-year university. Go to their website, make sure that they have an educational program that fits what you want, and then take the same steps that we've talked about tonight on completing the application to make the strongest application possible for the community college. We're going to take one more question. I'm a student at California Grossmont College, and I work at the college. Well, he also works at the college. And he just sent an I-20. It's not exactly a question. I'm not sure what you're asking. We have another question from Shahid. I have 97.4 in the 12th grade. Does it make me a strong candidate? It's a good question. Keep in mind that, again, with holistic approach, colleges and universities are looking at everything. So they're looking at your grades as well as your service But one thing that I didn't mention is that you do want to colleges are looking at students who are very well-rounded. So, if you are the type who studies, but all you do is study, you might want to think about, adding some extracurricular activities just to come off as a little well-rounded. And it's especially important as an international student. And again, we'll talk about this in a future segment. But you want to find things that will keep you occupied outside of the classroom as well, without jeopardizing your academic performance. Final question from Mohammed. Can you mention some of the name of some of the universities for studying master's degrees? We have hundreds in the United States, so definitely tune into our first segment, as well as go to educationusa.state.gov, and it will get you on the right path to finding a university for master's degree in the field that you want. I want to recap tonight's points. So we talked about the application process tonight, and I gave several points to keep in mind in order to make a strong application package. Read the application form, fill out the information completely and correctly, and don't forget to pay the application fee. Write a very strong statement of purpose, which is your opportunity to tell the admissions committee who you are, what makes you unique, and why you wish to study. Have a friend look it over, but make sure it's in your own words. If required, submit a very strong resume which talks about your educational achievements, your work and community experience, as well as any other volunteer activities that you've done. Have people who know you very well and who have seen your work very closely submit strong recommendations on your behalf. Submit all transcripts to the university so that they have an idea of your academic performance, and do the best you can on the standardized tests, SAT, ACT, GRE, GMAT, TOEFL, and IELTS. But keep in mind that even if you don't do so well, it isn't the end of the world, because if you have strong performance in other areas, then you still are under consideration. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in to tonight's chat. Follow our consulate's Facebook page so that you can be notified when we're going to air our next segment on the financial aid process. Thank you and have a good night.